We're going to be Nehemiah 3. I hope you read. Did you read ahead? How many of you did not read ahead? Just tell me right now. Okay, go ahead and read. Oh, wait. No, I can't do that either. No, the numbers are about right. 1 in 10. Listen. But thank you for having us out. We appreciate you. We love your church. We felt like after all the years I was coming out there to teach when Steve was sick, just feel like I needed an office there just to hang out. You know what I mean? But it's been good, and I know you guys have been blessed. You have a wonderful pastor who loves you and has great vision, right? A lot of guys going out as well, so we're very excited for Tuvai and the other guys. So praying, man. But here's the deal, and hopefully you're in chapter 3, and we're going to start there. With all that we've talked about, at some point there has to be a payoff, doesn't there? I mean, of all of the waiting and praying and hurting and crying, at some point, at the end of the line, you got to see fruit. Because if you don't see fruit, at some point you just go, all right, Lord, what's going on here? So there has to be that expectation of fruit, right? Herein is my Father glorified. You should bear much fruit. And not a little bit. And I am totally fascinated by Nehemiah's ability as an individual to change a generation, to change a city, to change a culture, change a people. You know, I know that we look around the world and we get pretty discouraged, like, oh man. And I know it's not going to get better. I've read the book of Daniel. I know when the Lord comes, it's going to be worse, not better. But I want to be sure that our generation gets to hear about our God. And we need all of you to be busy doing something, right? We need to enlist the men of God to be men of God. And I hope that, if nothing else, that the last couple of hours with us together have encouraged you to do that. You know, finish the book on your own. We'll bring some more of the books over to the church next week, because I really do want you to read it. I think it'll be worth your while. Because I want you to be the guy that God's going to use. I want to hear about the South Bay transformed. How about that? Right? Where God's name is glorified. Well, tonight we begin, like I said, chapter 3. We come to the work. You know, after all that we have seen, God begins to work in his people. We've called, or you can call this chapter and a half, a mind to work and a heart to pray and an eye to watch, because that's what it's going to take. And chapter 3, if you did read it, you probably had a hard time with it, I would think. It gives a detailed account of the start of the wall building project. We're going to build a wall. Mexico's going to pay for it now. How can I pass that up? Come on. Thank you very much. I'll be here all week. I'm sorry. You know how you upstage yourself? You're on a roll and then you make yourself miserable? There you go. But look, chapter 3 is a list of God writing down who did what, right? Of the Lord writing down, and except for the dishonorable mention of a few proud elitists in verse 5, everyone joined in to help, from the poor to the wealthy, from the powerful to the weak, from the well-known to the unknown. And there was this warm and this excited faith and bond in the camp, and progress was made quickly, once the ball got rolling. Now, it took months to get here. You know, understand, I'm sure you've been in building projects. If you're waiting for your house to get built and they're digging in the ground for 6 weeks, and I want to see the house. Well, you will eventually. The house goes up pretty quick. It's that underground stuff takes forever. Same thing in this kind of work, right? It takes a long time, but eventually that work gets done. So look, everyone shows up. We ended this morning, towards the end of the morning, with just Nehemiah sharing about what God had done, and the people being invited, and they said in verse 18, we're going to get up and rise and build. And we're going to put our hand to this good work. Well, let's look at a couple of verses. Verse 1 says, Eliashib the high priest, he rose up with his brethren, the priests. And they went to build the sheep gate, consecrating it. They hung its doors. They built as far as the Tower of the 100. They consecrated it all the way to the Tower of Hananel. Next to him, Eliashib, the men of Jericho built, and next to them, Zachar, the son of Imri built, and the sons of, forget it, built the fish gate, and they laid the beams and hung the doors with the bolts and the bars. And next to them, Meremoth, the son of Urijah, the son of, made repairs. And next to them, this fella was working, and next to them, Zadok was there doing the work. And then you read verse 5, the Tekoites made repairs, but their nobles didn't put their shoulders to the work of their God. I'm glad that the Lord's keeping track. Verse 8, next to him, Uzziel, the son of one of the goldsmiths, made repairs. And next to him, Hananiah, one of the perfumers, made repairs. They fortified Jerusalem all the way down to the broad wall. And next to them, Rephaiah, the son of Hur, leader of half of the district of Jerusalem, he made repairs. And you begin to read through this thing and you say to yourself, oh my goodness, it takes all kinds, right? There are folks in here with job qualifications that don't make them ready to do any of this at all. But they were interested in doing a part. And everyone showed up for work. And aside from a couple of rich guys who thought better of themselves than everyone else, God used them. God pushed them forward, right? There was no jealousy amongst them. Some of the fellows, if you'll read through there carefully, took 2 sections of wall. As you read the names and the accomplishments, you can't think about how God does that in every church, right? We step up. You do your part. You're happy in the place God has put you. I'm so thankful we have good worship leaders, aren't you? Aren't you encouraged by the time worship is done here? You are so blessed, right? Your heart is open. You're ready to hear. God is good. You're listening and he's speaking. We need that. We thank God for that, but that's not all we have. So it's part of what we have. The church is big and it has a lot going for itself. But here one heart, and it affected the entire city. I would say to you as a man of God, dream big. Ask for stuff you don't think God will give you. Why not ask? You have not, right? And you're not asking amiss. You want him to be glorified. So you're right on point. God, do something great in my life. It takes just as little time to do great things as small things. Come on, Lord. Do something big with me. I want you to notice that so many people were involved in all of these names here because something had happened with Nehemiah's ministry. He had been able to share the vision with them. The people caught the vision, didn't they? They caught the vision. They heard from the Lord. Chapter 2 always has to precede chapter 3. You can't jump to chapter 3, right? A true work of God begins in the heart of the individual. First the heart, then the work. First your heart, then the work. I always think about the Ephesian church there in Revelation chapter 2 because it seems to me that when the Lord begins to speak to them, everyone in that Ephesus church must have stood up with their chest out very proud. I know your works. I know your labor. I know your patience. I know you don't put up with those who like evil or pursue it. I know that you've tested those that say they're apostles, but they're not. You found them out to be liars. I know you've persevered. I know you've been patient. And you just be swelling, wouldn't you? That's right, Lord. That's our church. And then the Lord says, just one problem. You're thinking, oh, it's probably the ushers. Those guys are always problems. Right? And then what does he say? You have left your first love. Outwardly, church looked great, busy, calendar was full, big presence on the internet, social media was cooking. They were doing well. Only the Lord saw what was wrong. And it was all a matter of motivation, wasn't it? That's all that they lacked. They lacked the motivation of love for the Lord. They had become mechanical. Outwardly, they looked the same. They appeared to be going on unabated, but they weren't pleasing the Lord anymore. Here you have a bunch of folks whose names I can barely pronounce, who were at it because God had spoken to them. And Nehemiah, the man whom God used, had been able to communicate to them who God was. They came to serve. They gave what they had. Let me say this to you. What you have is sufficient. You don't need to be something you're not. What you have is sufficient. God will make up the rest anyway. If it's you without God, what you have is not good enough. Never good enough. Never near good enough. But if the Lord's hand's on you, what you have is good enough. Look at these men. Note how few of them were serving in the profession that they were used to. God was moving. The people were listening. The wall was being made. But let's face it, these were some unusual laborers. You usually don't call the priest to go, hey, can you build a wall in the backyard? Or the goldsmith. Or the guy making perfume. The perfume guy. Seriously. They're mixing concrete. They're trying to form the wall. Really? A perfume guy. Sweet perfume guy. He's out there doing that thing. I suspect, now I don't know, but I suspect that the wall wasn't that straight. You guys really are way ahead of me and it's not right. It's not at all what I meant. You're wicked people, all of you. But here's the point, and even the critics will say that of their work. Because they're not professionals, it doesn't look professional. Sorry about that linking there. It was actually pretty funny. I just didn't plan it, so there's no credit. Let me say a couple things about this. Ministry gifts and callings are two different things. Say that again. Ministry gifts and callings are two different things. The perfumer had a ministry gift, right? The perfume that he made for the offerings, for the sacrifice, very important. It was part of the work of God and the saints drawing near. But he wasn't very good. That was his ministry gift, but he still showed up to work. He had a calling, but he came to help. So there are times when it's not right up your alley. It's not down your lane. It's not exactly where you find yourself, but you have to serve. You make yourself available, right? Never confuse your calling with God's calling to serve. We have gifts from God with which we serve regularly, but we're also called to be ever ready outside of our expertise area when God puts us in those spots. And I find it very interesting that because the heart of man had been touched by the Spirit of God through Nehemiah's ministry, even these guys with no talent in the work that they were doing came to help, wanted to serve. I've heard people say, "Yeah, I'm not called to that." Well, that's true most of the time, but if there's a need, everyone's called to that. And I want to point out to you that as you read through this, you'll keep reading this little phrase, "and next to them, and next to them, and next to them." And these were folks that they couldn't even look to each other for help. What do you do with this thing? I don't know. Look to somebody else. They got a brick and a deal, and they don't know what to do and how to mix it up, but they're there, and they want to help. You don't have to be called to the Sunday school to help out if somebody doesn't show up one day and they need some help. Or if they're painting at the church, "I'm not a very good painter." Good, just show up, bring a brush. We'll figure it out. That doesn't require anything but just a heart that's willing. And the only guys, verse 5, that sit idly by are guys who thinks that they're better than everyone else. And I like the fact that God keeps good records. The other thing is Nehemiah had them working together. And I think there is something to be said. If you're going to go out and serve the Lord, get with people that are serving the Lord. Make yourself accountable and be encouraged. Jesus wasn't just arbitrarily going, "I think I'll send them out 2 by 2 because it sounds so good." First the 12, then the 70, 2 by 2, right? 2 by 2. Because that's what we need. We need fellowship. We need support. We need accountability. We need strength. I mean, even Moses, when the children of Israel were fighting the Amalekites, he couldn't hold his arm high enough to hold that staff of God out as the battle down in the valley. And, 2.5 million Jews with no training fighting a group that's used to fighting in the wilderness. God better come and help. And Moses said, "I can." And Aaron and Hur said, "Well, just hold up your arms." That's kind of the way God works, isn't it? I've not seen too many ministries that survive well with loners. I've found ministries began by loners, folks on their face like Nehemiah, but you can't live that way, right? You can hear from God, you can pursue the ministry, but then you need others. I'm the senior pastor, so I guess I can decide what we want to do from time to time. I make myself accountable to a whole bunch of guys in the church because I'm kind of a knucklehead. And I've found 100 times when I go, "What we're going to do," and then some guy goes, "Yeah, that's a bad idea. I'm the boss here, applesauce." And they'll tell me, I go, "You're right, that was a really dumb idea." I'm glad for the multitude of counselors. There's wisdom. Doesn't mean I'm not responsible. I'm ultimately, it falls on my desk, something goes wrong. But I like the fact that I'm surrounded by men who want to see what God wants to do, right? We're in this together. And if we all do our part, it ought to work just fine. But I love the picture of them working together. Jonathan wanted to go fight the Philistines. Where is that? 1 Samuel maybe 14? I don't know. If it isn't there, I didn't say it. Else it's 1 Samuel 14. And he said to his armor bearer, "Let's go see what the Lord might do with us." His dad, Saul, was like sleeping under some apple tree. He wasn't doing nothing to protect the people. It was just two of them, Jonathan and his armor bearer. And his armor bearer was like, "Jonathan, let's go see what God's going to do." And you know the story. I mean, they put off a whole army of Philistines to flight. But they did it together. They did it together. Plug in with a group. I don't think you can survive as a loner. You need protection. Your friends will bring that to you. You need encouragement. That'll happen as well. You need wisdom, multitude of counselors. You need strength. You need to do it together. I think it's one of the maybe the best reasons why you read in the Bible, don't forsake the assembling of yourselves together, as is the manner of some. I don't come. We broadcast all of our studies online. I think you guys do too, right? Live. We actually have some people that now stop coming to church. They go, I watch it's so good on the TV at home and my PJs, with my coffee. Really? And then I feel guilty like I haven't taught them properly, because that doesn't make any sense to me. Great, if you're sick, I get it. If your kids are sick, I get it. You get to plug in, but it should be the bailout, not the way of life. So we need to get together. How good has this been for us this weekend, just to hang around, right? Feel better than when you drove up, I'm sure, because that's how God works. I love it. Tremendous organizational here. This catalog or a worksheet of the names and the sites and the people working together, they did the best that they could, and God used every one of them. And if you'll do the best that you can, God will use you. So as you read through this and you get to the place where you read, I think it's verse 6 of the next chapter, it says that they got done halfway, all in short order. This is a team of relatively small workforce, limited talents, ever-growing enemy camp, and they just made it work. Another point I would like to point out to you in verse 1 is that the priests took the lead. I like that a lot. You want to lead? Then lead. Lead. Be able to say to the people that you're ministering to, follow me like I'm following Jesus. Lead. I suspect that for the priests, this is the first time they ever had calluses. Because let's face it, the biggest danger to a priest was like a paper cut. A paper cut reading today, I turned the page too fast or not. These guys were kind of, all right, they weren't as weenie as I put them out there to be, because they did have to kill and slaughter animals all day and all. But they took the lead. I guess that's the point I want to make to you. I'm going to get in trouble, man. I'm leaving early tonight. I'm not coming back ever again. And notice, verse 12, it says, and next to him was Shallum, the son of Halohesh, the leader of half of the district of Jerusalem. Amazing. Verse 17, it says, he was the leader of half the district of Keilah. He was making repairs. And you'll read through this and you'll find that these big shot leaders who are in charge of big districts of people were out there with everyone else. You want to really be a leader? Then set a good example. How we need men that will set good examples. The other thing that Nehemiah did that I thought was very smart, and we can read about it, for example, in verse 23. It says this, after him Benjamin and Hashub made repairs opposite their homes. And then Azariah, the son of this fellow and the son of that guy, made repairs by his house. And then down in verse 29, and after that Zadok, the son of Emer, made repairs in front of his own home. And Shemaiah, the son of Shechaniah, the keeper of the house, he also made repairs. And after that Hananiah, the son of this fellow, made repairs in front of his dwelling, verse 30 at the end. Many of the people that were working were working in places that would benefit them the most, right? Their greatest interest was their family, their own protection. It is certainly a great place to start your ministry. Start it at home. You have turmoil at home, you're not good to the church. Paul was wise enough to say to Timothy in chapter 3, verse, 4 and 5 maybe it is, if you don't rule well your own house, how are you going to rule the house of God? So it's a good place to start. Remember we talked a couple of hours ago, and at least a couple of studies ago, about what can you do while you wait? Well, you can do that. You can start working on being a good dad, being a good husband, being a good provider, being a good example in your house, so that when God calls you into his house, you'll have figured that out. You'll know how to love them and care for them and be patient with them and set good examples for them. We will find that ministry in people's lives oftentimes begin in places that hit closest to home, where God has given them an interest. We find that our nursery is usually filled with moms who use the nursery. And when those kids graduate to the next class, the moms quit the nursery and they go to the next class. I'm all right with that. They're following their kids around. They want to take care of them and watch over them. That's a pretty cool thing to see. And it's a good place to be. We have guys that have spent years in prison who now run our prison ministry. And we go to a lot of different prisons, and we go twice a week. And it's a tough gig. And prison conversions are fairly common. When folks get out, not so much. A lot of that turns out to be, well, that was when I was in there. But they go back because that's where their hearts are. And they love it. And they minister and find themselves there. We have a lot of guys that work on Tuesday mornings. We feed tons of families every Tuesday. And there are a lot of folks that work on Tuesdays that were homeless at one time, and now they're not. And they have a heart for the people. And they want to share the gospel with them. So it hits close to home. And I think leadership is pretty wise. Nehemiah understood that a lot of these folks, they would do their best work closest to home. And he puts them there. He puts them there. We have a group every other Friday that goes out to do street evangelism around the shopping centers where we live. To me, street evangelism is a very difficult gig. I don't know how you feel about it, but it's almost like cold calling, right? Nobody knows you. You're just like a word and a mouth and a Bible and a deal and how you doing? Scary looking guy on the street or something. And don't get me wrong, people get saved, but not many. It's usually seed planting, and the folks that I see getting saved the most are folks who know somebody and have watched their life and they understand that it works. But we have a whole group of folks that they're street folks, and they want to go out and witness. And they go out every week and they pray and they come back with the greatest stories and they're dragging people to church. This guy was at the movies. Look, he's here now. And it's the coolest thing, but that's where their heart is. That's their hope. We have tons of families every Sunday afternoon that go out to convalescent homes in the neighborhood with several places we go. It's a hard job, man. But these folks have been abandoned. The places sometimes smell bad. Not every owner of convalescent homes take good care of their people. But we go in every week. Families take their children, they take their dogs, they set them on the bed, they pray with people that can barely understand what they're saying. They love them, and it's from the heart. And it's just wonderful to stand and to watch. We have a huge sports ministry at our church, which God has greatly blessed, and I think the reason is because it's a great introduction to ministry. Guys that are just kind of getting started, but they like, they're jocks and they like to play softball, so we have softball teams. We have soccer teams, we have basketball teams. All of those are in secular leagues in and around our city. We bring families, we pray before we play, we invite the other team to join us in prayer. We have the families bring and cook hot dogs a couple times a year before or after the game, invite the guys to come in. It's been really fruitful. And guys begin to learn about reaching out in a place that is closest to their home. They show up wanting to beat the tar out of you with their bat or their ball, or you know how guys are. They're nuts for competition. But their heart gets to softening, and eventually they get to learn. But it starts closest to home for them. That's their closest to home. Oh, I love playing soccer. Well, good, come play soccer with us. You just have to pray and eat hot dogs. Well, it'll be all right, I can do that, And then pretty soon they're inviting people to church. So I love Nehemiah's example. Help people find a place that they're comfortable to serve. They got to grow into things. And they will if you would just kind of be wise to what they're doing. So work where it matters to you. And you find that here. Well, that's the whole chapter, isn't it? Just a bunch of next to him and over there. And these are the guys that are working. And know this, if you're one of these guys, God's got your name in a book. He takes notice. And if you're a verse 5 kind of guy, I'm sorry. You're also in the book under the negative column. Verse 1, chapter 4, but it so happened when Sanballat heard that we were rebuilding the wall, he was furious, very indignant. He began to mock the Jews. He spoke before his brethren and before the army of Samaria. Wow, they keep growing. And he said, what are these feeble Jews doing? Will they fortify themselves? Are they going to offer sacrifices? Are they going to complete this in a day? Apparently they were working so hard, they're feverishly. Will they revive the stones from the heaps of the rubbish, stones that have been burned? And his buddy Tobiah the Ammonite was beside him. He said, whatever they build, even if a fox goes up on the wall, it's going to break down their stone wall. One of the major lessons of the book of Nehemiah, and we haven't spent much time on it because I think it almost goes without saying, is that when you begin to see your vision come to fruition, the opposition is usually there as well. And whether it's anger, and ask yourself if you read verse 1, why is this guy angry? Why would he be mad? Who knows? So spiritual warfare we're in, isn't it? Displeasure that he shows, his mockery. Sticks and stones, by the way, I've learned do hurt. Sticks and stones may break, they hurt. And You'd have thought that this small group's diligent effort might have brought praise. It did not. And Satan's not real happy when you're working either. So understand that whatever you do in the name of the Lord, Satan's going to try to discourage you. There's nothing new there, but the enemy will be furious, and you'll look like feebleness to him. He will mock you. He will. You wimps, look at the priests. They can't barely swing that sledgehammer. Go back and sacrifice something. You don't qualify. I think from a spiritual standpoint, maybe the best analogy that I could use for building the walls is an analogy that the Bible uses of reaching people that are lost, whose walls are down, who've been destroyed, right? That we're called to go reach. And as Jesus comes into their lives, their walls are built back up. Their lives are put in order. So as you go out to share with the Lord, people are going to turn on you. They're going to see you as some weak, dependent kind of guy. And I actually had a guy say to me a couple of weeks ago that I was sharing with at the market, hey, this is the 21st century, for goodness sake. Yeah, that's a good argument. You've waited this long and you're still not smart yet, you know? Come on. But his point was, I'm self-sufficient, I'm independent, I can work it out, I don't need no Jesus, maybe you do. Well, that's right, people are going to turn on you, you're going to be mocked. But if you keep at it, somebody like you is going to reach somebody like you. Somebody reached you, didn't they? I mocked a lot of my buddies that were witnessing to me. There was a guy at Huntington Beach, I don't know if you guys ever met him, he'd just stand on the corner and read the Bible. He's an older gentleman, now he's in his 60s, but he was there when he was in his 30s. And he would stand and read the Bible at the light where you cross to go to the pier. And he would read it about this quiet. He wouldn't say anything, he wouldn't look you in the eye. You could talk to him, he wouldn't talk to you, just keep reading the Bible. He just believed like this was the way to go. Me and my friends would mock this guy and laugh at him and come on, let's all stand around and watch him. And, you know, we're stupid. When I got saved, I went back and apologized to this guy and thanked him for standing out there and reading his Bible. For the first time, I heard him stop and go, "You're welcome." And then he went right back to reading his Bible again. Pretty interesting fella. Look, if you stick with it, you'll become the testimony that people will get saved by. So here's a work of God. It is going really well. Everybody showed up except for a few. Everyone has less than admirable qualities in the work that they're doing, and yet God is using them. But here comes the enemy, right? He'll mock your ideas. He'll question your motives. He'll point out your inabilities. He'll belittle your accomplishments. He'll seek to sidetrack you. He'll challenge your commitment. If that doesn't work, he'll just talk to you about your failures and your past. He's never done. He's never out of ammunition. He doesn't go away. But he's a loser. And we win, don't we? I read the whole book. There's victory in Jesus. You just got to stay the course. So Nehemiah, here's a guy 8 months ago was sitting 700 miles away working for the king of the world with a broken heart, and now look what they're doing. Look what they're doing. Look how quickly God has worked. And he's got to face criticism. And I suspect, like I said before, but I didn't mean to tie the two together, that this criticism was probably accurate, that the wall probably leaned in some places, and that some laborers had more cement on them than on the wall. Because that's kind of the way I would do it. But yet, the wall was going up, right? So even their sacrifices were being taunted, their spiritual motivation. And notice also from verse 1 and 2 and verse 3 how the group is growing. Now we have an entire Samaritan army here. And they're slandering folks. Now, what do you expect from Nehemiah at this point? I mean, you get to know him a little bit. Do you expect him to lash out? I don't anymore. I would have early on. No, he does what he always does. He takes it to the Lord. Look at his prayer in verse 4. He says this, "Hear, O our God, for we are despised, and turn their reproach on their own heads, and give them as plunder to the land of captivity." That's a pretty powerful prayer. Do not cover their iniquity. Don't let their sins be blotted out from before you. They have provoked you to anger before the builders. Well, Nehemiah, they provoked you to anger? No, they provoked the Lord to anger. I love the fact that he fights back on his knees. It's an interesting prayer for me, and maybe you've prayed like that. When you're mad, you just tell God you're mad. Lord, could you just break their teeth in their mouth? That's a famous Bible prayer, isn't it? Maybe you know exactly where that one is and you got that one underlined. The important thing is, look, he lives in a culture that an eye for an eye is good and better honest than deceitful. I don't want you to forgive them, Lord. I want you to destroy them. Amen. That's how he prays. But at least he took it to the Lord. Didn't he? He took it to the Lord. A soft answer turns away wrath. A harsh word stirs up anger. The heart of the righteous studies how to answer. The mouth of the wicked pours forth evil. Proverbs, it's also in chapter 15, I think, same chapter towards the end. So Nehemiah leaves it with the Lord. And then verse 6, so we built the wall. God deal with them, and we built the wall. And the entire wall was joined together up to half of its height, for the people had a mind to work. Opposition from the enemy can do little if you have a mind to work. You know people that get so distracted from the work because of the opposition, and they'll say, oh, I've been trying to do this, and they'll tell you for half an hour what the devil has been doing. I think that Nehemiah, and especially the next chapter, if you continue to read, you'll come away with a lesson that you shouldn't be distracted from the work by the opposition. It's going to be there. But you got a work to do. You got a job to do. There's no time for distraction. So put some blinders on and look up at the Lord. Give him all of your concerns. And you notice verse 6, they're halfway done. The wall was to half of its height fairly quickly. Now, when you're halfway done, there's a lot of things that happen. Number one, it's easy to get discouraged because you're only halfway done. And the excitement is worn off. And it's another day with a trowel and now I got to get on a ladder. And these guys outside keep showing up, and now they're threatening to shoot me, you know? It's getting worse. It's getting more difficult. It's getting harder. Halfway done has all kinds of its own problems, but here's the interesting thing. That when you have a mind to work, then you've got a way to work. And there's no trick that Satan can work against you if you have a mind to work. Keep your eye on the Lord. Now it happened, verse 7, when Sanballat and Tobiah and the Arabs and the Ammonites and the Ashdodites, you got to be kidding me. It's a protest march. When they heard that the walls of Jerusalem were being restored, that the gaps were beginning to be closed, they became very angry, and they conspired together to come and to attack Jerusalem and to create confusion. Now, a couple of things to notice that you may not have in reading it yourself. All of these guys mentioned hate each other. None of these folks get along. You remember when Herod and Pilate sent Jesus back and forth, there's a verse there that says, and that day they became friends before they didn't get along. Right? They were brought together, I think it's in Luke 23 somewhere. They became friends in their opposition to Jesus. Well, here's a whole bunch of guys who hate each other, but they hate the Jews and God's work even more. And they're brought together, they bury their differences just so that they can do something evil. And Samaria is to the north, Arabia is to the south, Ammon is to the east, Philistia is to the west. The capital of that place was Ashdod. The Ashdodites were there. Let's just say they were surrounded by enemies working the work of God. That's kind of cool, isn't it? What was that Marine sergeant said? We're surrounded by our enemy, don't let anyone get away. I think that's what we say, right, as believers. No direct war here because the king would have come to destroy them, but terrorist kind of threats. We're going to come and create confusion. We're going to attack them when they're least expecting it. And now you've got a bunch of people building a wall, and they're having to look over their shoulder, and they're having to be afraid. During the Roman persecution, which started in 67 AD, right, when Nero burned down Rome, and he blamed the Christians when he got the response. From 60. Well, actually, it was a couple years earlier, but it was in full throw in 67 AD when Peter was killed and Paul was killed during that year. And it went on for 300 years, right, until Constantine came and brought a different kind of problem to the church. But at the end of the first century, there's a lot of historical books that say every day 10,000 people were losing their lives for their faith, and 50,000 were getting saved. 10,000 were dying, 50,000 were getting saved. It's a pretty interesting picture, but here, these folks are now having to put their life on the line, and are they willing to pay the cost? And Nehemiah has to deal with this next problem, and what does he do? And you guessed it, verse 9, we made our prayer to God, and because of them, we set a watch against them day and night. Look, the issue wasn't we're going to stop working. The issue is we're going to do a little planning. We're going to pray, and then we're going to do our best. We're going to be careful. Prayer is never a substitute to be responsible. You know that, right? Never. I hear people go, yeah, I don't lock my doors, I trust the Lord. Well, you're going to get your house robbed. Just saying. Because the Lord will say to you when you're upset with him, you should have locked the doors. That's why I gave you locks. Be smart. If you're out of a job, don't sit home and go, oh, I'm just waiting for the Lord to give me a job. No. Go knock on doors for 8 hours, like a job. Go look for a job. Make looking for a job your job. Because God can't steer if you're docked at the harbor. So get out and serve. Well, look at this example. And Nehemiah is so practical. We can't stop what we're doing, but we can plan to be careful with the threats that we face. And God always wants you to be an active participant in what he is doing. Right? So persistence with biblical common sense makes sense, doesn't it? It makes sense. One guy from 700 miles away with a broken heart starts all of this. I love that. What are you going to start? What trouble are you going to cause? What dent in the kingdom of the devil are you going to make? What progress in God's kingdom are you going to make? What are you going to do? When are you going to do it? How about now? How about soon? How about starting as quickly as God gives you a direction? Nehemiah was a practical guy. He was a spiritual man. He did the work that he could. He kept his feet on his ground, but he kept his ear in heaven. And he made a big difference. And I suspect you guys can too. I've watched you worship. You love the Lord. I've listened to what you said to me. I know you want to serve him. So what's holding you back? What's keeping you from what God wants to do with your life? I suspect nothing but you. He's more than willing. He's looking, his eyes are going to and fro through the whole earth trying to find anyone whose heart is perfect towards him. It isn't that he's run out of work. You don't have to sit on the bench. You can be the A team if you want. What are you going to do? You see, it's not good enough to just make promises. It isn't any good until you get to moving and the fruit begins to flow. You ready to make some fruit? Father, thank you for these men, and I know that, God, you have great intentions for them, and I pray, Father, that nothing will keep them from your best. Lord, I know that there are many of us sitting together tonight that don't feel like we're those kind of folks, that we don't have what it takes, that we're not sure we can take the lead, we don't feel we know enough, we're not sure we're smart enough, we don't know if we can have any influence, we see our weaknesses, our own, we think maybe we're disqualified, and yet we look through this book and it seems to me, Lord, that Nehemiah became a man who led all of those kind of folks to greatness together. So may we grab hold with confidence of your promises. May we identify where you want us to be by what breaks our heart. May we be willing to be the vessel through whom you'll answer the need. May we pray with confidence. May we depend upon you. May we not try to help you out in terms of opening doors that only you can open. May we go forward in faith, believing. May we share what we've learned with those around us. May we not depend on man, but depend upon you. And Lord, as you begin a great work, may we give you the glory for it. And may you change the culture in which we find ourselves. May the church in the South Bay shine brightly for Jesus. And may the folks who work at the docks or down at the manufacturing plants and all throughout the cities, may they come to know you. May it be a revival, Lord, the kind we pray for all the time. And may that revival begin with us. So go before these men, Lord. Place your hand upon them. Empower them. Speak to them. May they hear your voice. And may nothing and no one dissuade them from following you. And may they be men who lead others as they follow you. Lord, we're looking forward to a chapter 3. A chapter 3 of victory. And may you begin with us tonight, we ask. In Jesus' name. Amen. God bless you guys. Thank you for having us.